I'm going on a journey to find out if you can replicate the effect of Ozempic without taking GLP-1s. Is there a way to silence the food noise without using Ozempic? We're back after popular demand for part 2. I say back by popular demand because my first video, 8 views, which brings my YouTube channel to a total of, probably by the time that I'm editing this, it's going to be like 7. My last video in this tutorial series about learning how to eat intuitively. And again, I just want to caveat this with, I am not a nutritionist and I'm not a trained intuitive eating coach. I say tutorial, but it's really more about me teaching myself. A lot has changed in the last year or two with the introduction of GLP-1 injections, aka Ozempic, that can actually stop the food noise in your brain, the dopamine hit that we're getting in our brain. But it also tells your brain, okay, you're satiated, you're full, you can stop now. What I've realized is that through dieting, through years of dieting and years of restriction, we've basically numbed our brain to the natural GLP-1, so that natural message between our tummy and brain. And that's important because instead of just Claire wants to find out how to eat intuitively, it's Claire wants to replicate the effect of Ozempic without using drugs. So the people who use Ozempic, and I've read articles and I may or may not know some people, not me, my friends, or the articles that I've read about people who take it, and there was an article in The Cut this week about the new, I think it's Wegovy pill you can take. I think it just becomes so pertinent to what I'm trying to do now, which is effectively replicate or imitate what that drug, what the Wegovy Ozempic drug can do, but without using drugs. That's the big, let's call it the big hook of this workshop. And again, I think it's important to say I'm not an overweight person. However, this is more of a journal or a diary, and I have struggled with food noise my entire life, as I think most people, I don't know, maybe in the Western world have. I'd say the Anglo-Saxon countries, which is where I'm from. I'm Irish originally. Our culture doesn't have a very good relationship with food. And so for me living in France now, it's unthinkable that I would just go and buy strawberries in February. But this is all a very French thing I've learned. When I go home to Ireland, like, you'll have blueberries in the fridge all year round. We don't even grow blueberries in Ireland. Correct me if I'm wrong, Irish blueberry farmers. This started out, my first chapter was all about the Intuitive Eating Workbook, because this idea of intuitive eating was new to me, and I thought this was something that could really be a great start. I actually thought it would be the answer. So something has definitely shifted for me, and that something is that I realized that I thought I was going to find this holy grail of, if I just follow these steps, I will silence the food noise, become one with my body, and never overeat or binge again. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So there's been a shift. We're moving away from one book, one answer, and more into learning about my own body, learning about my own brain, and learning about the relationship between the stomach and the brain, and just trying to find out if there's a way, or if there are ways to rebuild that trust, essentially have a healthy relationship with food. Food and I have had an abusive relationship for years, and not because I'm an overweight person, but because I've struggled with wanting to be a certain weight, but also not eating very well, not treating my body very well, just not listening to any of my body's signals and overriding my body's cues. And I think after years of doing that, I've really just like numbed my entire nervous system to not knowing what it feels like to be full, not knowing what it feels like to be satisfied or satiated, not knowing what it feels like to eat something and think, no, I don't really want the rest of it, and not panic that I'll never be able to eat it again because I'll be on the next big regime. So really this is a path to find my own alignment within my body and also with food. And I really like the word alignment because it kind of speaks to the sort of bigger message of this YouTube channel, which, if it's your first time here, welcome to my 9th viewer. This channel is all about finding peace in the busy life of a working mum in Paris, sharing the playbooks that I learn along the way, so hopefully you can find a bit of peace in your life too. So what's the real problem? The real problem is that years of dieting, restriction, binging, I have completely numbed, I think, my body's messaging system between the stomach and the brain. I can't try an Ozempic or a GLP-1 in France. I just don't have the option. And even if I did, I mean, sure, I would be tempted by that pill, of course, just to see what it felt like. There are tons of people around me in France who can happily eat a croissant and enjoy it, be satisfied with it, and then move on to the next meal and not dwell on it and not think about it. So, I mean, there's proof all around me every day that we don't need Ozempic to know how to listen to our body's signals and cues. And so why not find out if that's possible to create myself or to recreate? We're going to quickly go through the principles of the Intuitive Eating Workbook because I want this to be a tutorial too. And I want there to be things that you can take away and maybe apply to your own life. And so I've done the work. So now I can just tell you guys what it is. I also do recommend, if this sounds interesting to you, of course, go and buy the Intuitive Eating Workbook. There's also a book that was written before, which is the Intuitive Eating Guide, which will properly lay out the theories that I'm just going to skim over. But if you prefer to just skim and have the information fed to you, I'll try and do that in as succinct a way as possible. So, principle 1 is reject diet culture. The concept of this principle is that we live in a world of diets and the idea that certain foods are good and certain foods are bad, and that diet culture has got us into this place in the first place, which I do definitely agree with. It's definitely what happened to me. It was the years of dieting that led me to numb my own relationship with my body's cues and signals. Kind of rejects the idea of, I know when I eat certain foods that generally, like, I'm just in better condition. I sleep better, my skin is better, I have more energy. The book at the very end comes back to this idea of bringing nutrition as a concept back into your relationship with food. But at the offset, I find it very difficult to list all these diet rules that I've made for myself and then just say that I have to delete them all, because I actually don't want to give up all the things I've learned. And there's a lot of positive things I've learned through the diet books. And the one especially is Women, Food and Hormones by Sarah Gottfried, which I think, like, scientifically, it really is good, for me at least, to eat certain foods and try not to eat certain other foods. In the Western world, or maybe in the whole world, probably actually in the whole world, dieting is really closely linked to restriction. And I think there are lots of diets out there, or at least food plans, which involve no restriction. Like if you're eating whole foods, if you're doing the Whole30, you don't restrict at all. Rejecting diet culture completely, that is the first concept, sat a little bit trickily with me. Principle 2, honor your hunger. Yeah. So this comes off the back of, after years of dieting, if your body hasn't been fed properly, it basically goes into a kind of famine state where it's constantly stressed about not getting the food that it needs. So it basically means that our ability to stop or not stop eating has nothing to do with our willpower. It's actually probably the opposite. It's probably that we had too much willpower to restrict ourselves. Now our body is like, we're not doing that again. So it is sending the brain all the signals it can when you're eating something naughty to eat as much as possible. It's like, no, we were in that famine before when she was on keto, so we're not going to do that again. Quick, get those cookies, get the croissants in as much as possible. And the really nice takeaway from this chapter for me is to identify the difference between mind noise and self-care. So there can be two different voices in your head at all times. And like, if you start listening to them, it can be so interesting. So self-care would be, I haven't eaten in 6 hours. I should probably go and get myself a snack so I don't become too hungry. Whereas mind noise would say, oh, you haven't eaten in 6 hours and you're not hungry. That's great. See how far you can push it. And even just learning to tag them in your brain, it's just so interesting. Principle 3, make peace with food. So the real guts of this concept is stop labeling any foods as forbidden and any foods as good. Because as soon as a food is forbidden, it triggers the psychological effect of scarcity, which is, I want it because I know I can't have it. You're taking away the messaging cues from the stomach and putting them back into the brain. I understand this so well because being in a binge cycle, you restrict yourself so much all week, say, and then on Friday evening, you go absolutely bananas and you eat until you're more than full. It's so interesting to understand that that's actually an evolutionary response. I do, however, have a little bit of a conflict with the idea of all foods are created equal. And I know the whole point is to work to a place where you feel that way, but like, I know that a high processed sweet treat is not the same as broccoli. Although the concept is if we stop restricting the high processed food sweet, we'll stop wanting it. I just don't know if I can believe that. Like, the book argues that a toddler will always eat exactly what he needs for maximum nutrition. I've seen my toddler. Like, if he knows that there's something highly processed and delicious like Cocoa Pops available, he's not interested in that broccoli. There are foods that have been created to just mess with our brains, like peanut M&Ms, and there's nothing you can do. You want it, like I've said it now, so I know you want it. I just can't not think of that food as being negative. So maybe that's something I need to work on, but I found that difficult in the workbook. Principle 4, sorry, this is very dense. I might need to break it up into 2 videos, but let's keep going anyway. Principle 4 is discover the satisfaction factor. The idea is that, like, if we just keep feeding ourselves boring food that we don't enjoy, like the diet should just be soup or the diet should just be salad, and we keep chugging them, we don't want them. We're never going to feel satiated, and ultimately we will try and reach for something else, and that something else is probably going to be something that's not good for us. So this whole chapter and the workbook is about engaging your senses as you eat, and like exploring the smell of something, the way it looks on the plate, and really defining what you enjoy eating. That means eating without distractions, so not with a TV on, not with a book out, not with music on in the background, preferably not with anyone talking to you. And there's a very specific exercise in the book where you have to notice the moment when the taste drops. So the concept is the dopamine reactor goes off at first when it tastes something good, and that's the GLP-1 messaging going on. And then there's a moment when the dopamine drops off because the brain is thinking, yeah, that's probably enough of it. And if we're not listening to our bodies and listening to our cues, we might not notice that. But if you're attuned while you're eating, there will be a moment when the next forkful isn't as appealing as the others were. And just clocking that moment is such good training for understanding your own fullness and understanding your own satisfaction with food. Like something I learned while I was looking at this, reading through this chapter, I don't like eating salads which are too difficult to pack onto one forkful. So like, you know that frizzy, I don't know what it's called, but that frizzy lettuce. I feel like it's called frizz. That's like really like sort of spiky and it kind of falls off your fork, or rocket or something. And so eating something like that wouldn't satisfy me versus like a nice baby spinach, like well dressed, mashed up with loads of like avocado and sweet potato. And the idea is don't eat the things that aren't satisfying you. It might be on your diet, but if you don't want that dry pork chop for dinner, just don't eat it. Now, principle 5, feel your fullness. This principle is all about reconnecting with your fullness signals, eating more slowly, chewing everything. To stop eating so quickly, I try and put my fork down between each mouthful. And it's ridiculously hard to do that. And trying to really chew everything. I mean, ultimately, you should be chewing everything until it's like completely liquid in your mouth. And like, you'd be astonished at how hard that is. And I realize it's so weird that that's hard, because the whole point of like being excited to eat is that you get to eat it. And then suddenly it's in your mouth and you're like, oh, this is so annoying, I have to chew it. Like, are we supposed to be enjoying this or not? I think it's a great concept to learn how to feel your fullness. So the principle I love the most of this entire book is the principle 6. Principle 6 is called challenge the food police. The food police are inside your head. So this chapter was so eye-opening for me because it teaches you to identify the different voices in your head talking about food. In other words, the food noise. Guess what? The food noise has multiple characters and they all have names. I just found that so enlightening and something I could really start applying. So within the food noises in our brains, there are destructive voices and ally voices. So within destructive voices, we have the food police, which is basically the dictator, that angry voice that says, well, I've eaten that pizza, I've definitely gained a kilo. Then there's the nutrition informant, which is kind of like the rat. What do you call it? Snitch, the snitch. Snitches get stitches. So it's like that like annoying little, ooh, guess what? Cheese is gonna raise your cholesterol. So it's mean, but it's also a bit snitchy. Then there's the diet rebel. So this one, very familiar to me, which is, well, you've ruined it now, Claire. The week's fucked. So you're going to have to just eat all the pizza you can today because you're never going to be allowed to eat it after today. Then there are the ally voices. And these voices are great. They're going to become my best friend. So there's the food anthropologist, a neutral observer. I noticed that I felt overly full after that burger. Neutral. I noticed blah, blah, blah. But it's an observer that's attuned to you. It's a professor of you. Then there's the nurturer, which is the kind reset voice. It usually says something like, well, I definitely overate there, or I probably didn't need to finish the packet of crisps, but I did, so we'll move on now. So it's kind of neutral, but it's also like on your side. Then there's the nutrition ally. So it's looking at the nutrition side of things for you. So it's kind of the scientist on this side, and it's saying things like, ooh, I felt a little bit bloated after that guacamole. I wonder if it's the red onion. Maybe that makes me bloated. So there's no judgment. It's not trying to tell you anything is good or bad, but it's just your ally and it's there to just notice things. Finally, there is the intuitive eater voice, which I think just comes above everything. And I haven't got there yet, but the idea is that one day it'll be there to just calmly kind of combine all of these voices into one that I can just trust fully. It'll be the voice of internal wisdom, and it'll be the voice that's telling me or just nudging me towards my body's cues. I think it's something like I could practice and get better at. So when I hear that voice saying, well, you've ruined it now, you might as well eat the whole pizza, just to be like, oh, hi, Diet Rebel, how are you? Have you met my friend, the Nutrition Ally? I think you two would really get on. I think that's just so useful. That's That's so practical. Also, I've never heard that before. A quick touch on the other principles, how not to use food as a crutch for emotions. But as I'm in kind of a great place emotionally at the moment, it's not that useful for me, so I kind of skimmed. Then there's a whole chapter about finding movement that really speaks to you and finding a way to love movement. And that's something that I have in my life already. I love to run outside when I'm at home in Ireland. I love to do yoga here in Paris. Then the last chapter is pretty interesting because it talks about gentle nutrition, and it kind of undermines chapter 1, which is reject diet culture completely. It says like we purposefully don't bring nutrition in until the very last chapter, until you've worked through all the other exercises, because we know someone who's been a dieter will probably hang on too hard to the nutrition part and not really be able to listen to the rest because they're looking for another quick fix. They're looking to be told what's right and what's wrong. But it does explore the idea that like certain foods we should eat more of and certain foods we should eat less of. For me, like the ultimate diet is the one that keeps my body the healthiest for longest. So I'm 99. I'm still playing with my great-grandchildren, swimming in the sea with them. I know I'm not going to achieve that by eating Cheetos every day. I didn't do all of the exercises because some of them I think are a bit heavy-handed, but I did start to implement these concepts. And what that looked like was, well, you know, you should be able to eat whatever you want without restriction and not label foods as good or bad. And I did it, and I went skiing with my girlfriends to Courchevel. And I think like a ski trip would usually be a time for me of extreme binge. It's like in winter and the mountain food and you're cold, you know, there's a lot of fondue, a lot of booze. I didn't binge, but I definitely didn't restrict anything. When I came back from skiing, that would usually be, okay, well, I've skied now and I've had a weekend of fun and overeating, and now it's time for me to restrict. So I came back and I didn't restrict myself last week. And then what happened was I stood on the scales. By the way, you're supposed to throw out your scales. That's like number 1 rule, but I'm not there yet. And I gained a kilo. And I just was like, yeah, I mean, all of this intuitive eating is great, but if it's going to make me put on weight, I can't make peace with that. And I still think that even after all those exercises, I'm still overeating. The truth is, we can all reject diet culture, but I also know what I want my body to look like. And I know that I feel at my best when I'm at a certain weight or size. And it's just not something I'm willing to give up on. The other thing is, if we're going to try and replicate the GLP-1 effect, well, one of the effects, pretty much the reason people take it, is to reach their goal weight. If intuitive eating doesn't get me to that goal weight, then it's not enough for me. And it means my journey hasn't finished here. The question for me now, is there a way for me to be someone who follows a diet but also eats intuitively? Can I have peace while also following certain food rules? So I'm basically having to build my own framework, and that's good. And I think the only way this is going to work is if I figure these things out for myself. And I've learned too much along the way about what works for my body and what doesn't to just give that all up. So what's next? What's the next step? So we're taking certain things from the workbook and we're leaving certain things behind. We're taking the hunger awareness, satisfaction factor, fullness cues, neutral observation, and then most importantly, trying to work towards replacing those harsh voices with my allies. When I'm eating or when I'm not eating, when I'm thinking about food, I think like that's going to be a great first step for me to start reading my body's cues. It's just labeling those voices. What I'm leaving behind for now is fully rejecting any diets or concept of diets. I'm rejecting the idea that all foods are created equal for my body and that there are no foods which are technically better for me or not better for me. I'm rejecting the idea of neutrality around weight goals. Maybe it's stupid, but I'm just not throwing out that weighing scales, not yet. Maybe there'll be a day where I do, and I hope we go on that journey together, all 7 of my subscribers. The next book I'm going to try, I've already started reading it. Martha Beck, she wrote the book, The Way of Integrity. She has a book about dieting, kind of, called The 4-Day Win. So it's about dieting, but it's not a diet book. It's more about the psychology of bringing yourself into alignment with your body, which I think is going to be really interesting as a next step from what we've learned so far. What's it going to look like for the week? Well, interestingly enough, I'm going skiing again tomorrow. This time it's with my family, so it's with my husband, my stepsons, and my son, Bastian. So again, we're kind of going into a danger zone because holidays are always danger zone. You're away from home, you're away from your kitchen, you're away from your own routine. And skiing especially, as I say, like you're in the mountain, everything is melted cheese. It's really interesting to see if I can take what I've learned from my Intuitive Eating Workbook time and apply it to skiing. But I mean, if you want, I can record a diary while I'm up there in the mountains. I'm calling this a tutorial, but I want it to also feel a bit like an experiment or like a journey we're going on together. So hopefully I can read the books and I can distill the information into ways that you can use it or applicable to your own life. But if not, even if it's just entertaining to watch me try and fail at things, then great.